Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Information Command Center for our midday update. And in this update, we're speaking with the National Epidemiologist Dr. Francois, along with the Deputy Chief Environmental Health Officer, Ms. Cheryl Romain. Right now, the Ministry of Health and Wellness has officially declared an outbreak of dengue fever. We turn now to Dr. Francois, who will give us an overview of the situation at this time.
Over the last few weeks, the Ministry of Health and Wellness has continued to provide updates to the public on the significant increases in trends of dengue viral infection. These increasing trends now constitute an outbreak. This means that the numbers currently being reported exceed the numbers expected, and as such, this warrants immediate and a targeted response. As of the week of August 9th to 15th, 2020, there have been 168 confirmed cases of dengue infection. The hospitalization rate has been 46%, and case fatality rate remains at 0%. 38% of these reported cases were between the ages of 5 to 14 years. Even more concerning is the fact that both serotypes 2 and 3 of dengue are in circulation in St. Lucia. While most of the reported cases are concentrated in the northern, central, and eastern regions of the island, cases have also been reported in the south and west of the island, but to a lesser extent. The public health impact of managing a dengue outbreak, combined with adjusting to the new normal amid COVID-19 pandemic, will place a strain on the already stretched healthcare services. The direct economic costs of treatment, hospitalization, and prevention, as well as the indirect costs, such as loss of productivity related to absence, disability, or death, and the effects on the tourism, is of concern to an already fragile economy. The Ministry of Health and Wellness therefore solicits the usual cooperation of the public in dealing with this emerging public health threat. Dengue fever is one of the most prevalent arboviral infections worldwide. Dengue fever is mosquito-borne, which means that it is transmitted by a mosquito, usually the female Aedes aegypti, and to a lesser extent the Aedes albopictus. These are the same mosquitoes that are responsible for transmitting chikungunya, yellow fever, and Zika viruses. The mosquito lives in urban habitats and breeds mostly in man-made containers. It is a daytime feeder with its peak biting periods in the early morning and the evening before sunset. Dengue is widespread throughout the tropics with local variations in influenced by rainfall, temperature, humidity, and unplanned rapid urbanization. Dengue is also endemic to St. Lucia, which means that there is continued local transmission throughout the year. However, we see spikes at certain points during the year, usually during the rainy season when the rains come in and there is breeding of the mosquito. There are 4 distinct types or serotypes of the virus, types 1, 2, 3, and 4. Recovery from infection is believed to be lifelong. You get immunity for the rest of your life from one serotype. However, cross-immunity to other types is only temporary. After recovering from the first dengue infection, an individual is protected from infection with the remaining 3 dengue serotypes for about 2 to 3 months, which means in our context, as we do have type 2 and 3 in circulation, it is possible for an individual to be infected twice during the year. Subsequent infections or secondary infections to other serotypes increase the risk of developing what is known as severe dengue. Dengue viral disease has an incubation period of 4 to 10 days after the bite of the mosquito. And by the incubation period, I mean the time at which the person acquires the infection to the time when they start manifesting signs and symptoms. About 75% of dengue infections are asymptomatic, meaning there are no signs or symptoms, or produces a very mild febrile illness. Non-dengue illness usually presents as a flu-like illness that affects young children, adults with symptoms lasting for 2 to 7 days. And this may be very easily confused with COVID-19 as we continue to monitor and observe what is happening on ground in terms of COVID-19 and the opening up of our economy. Persons with mild dengue may present with fever, accompanied by skin rash, nausea, vomiting, usually pain behind the eyes, and muscle and joint pain. In its more severe form, persons may progress to bleeding from the gums or nose, vomiting of blood, and passing blood in the stool. They may also experience severe abdominal pain or excessive vomiting, which may lead to dehydration. About 5% of persons progress from to the severe form of dengue infection. There is unfortunately no specific treatment or vaccine for dengue virus infection. The treatment is mainly supportive based on how the individual presents. Dengue fever cannot be transmitted from one person to another, and it requires the presence of the mosquito. It is common, however, to have several persons in the house infected, as all that is necessary is the mosquito and a sick individual. So the mosquito, therefore, would bite that sick individual in the family and bite somebody else within that family, and so you would have several members of a family being infected with dengue virus. Prevention and control, therefore, involves elimination of the Aedes aegypti mosquito, and it is something that we as a country can work towards the eradication of the mosquito and help to control the situation in St. Lucia.
Thank you so much there, Dr. Michelle Francois. And before we begin the conversation on the official declaration of an outbreak of dengue fever, we'll now hear from the Deputy Chief Environmental Health Officer, Ms. Cheryl St. Romain.
Good afternoon, Lisa, and everyone listening. With the declaration of this outbreak, the Environmental Health Division, through the Ministry of Health and Wellness, is promoting awareness about the importance of preventing and controlling the proliferation of mosquitoes in communities. In the aftermath of prolonged rainfall, vessels become flooded with water and become breeding grounds. Combined with the summer heat, mosquitoes reproduce at a quicker rate, resulting in a drastic increase in mosquito population. It is of utmost importance that we, the general public, give attention to standing water around our property, so this can help prevent conditions that lead to mosquito multiplying and spreading diseases in the community, and in this case, it's dengue fever. We encourage every person and community to properly prepare to combat the growth of mosquitoes, especially during this season. It is critical that we prevent the spread of dengue fever. All members of a community benefit when individuals take the right precautions, including emptying standing water and using mosquito repellents to prevent getting bitten. Homeowners can help mitigate mosquito problems by taking steps before and after heavy rainfall to reduce areas where standing water may accumulate around the home. To protect yourself from mosquito at home, it is best to prevent mosquito breeding around your house. Ensure screens are placed or repaired on windows and doors and all vents into your homes. Use insect repellents when both inside and outside the house to prevent mosquitoes from biting. It is important to use products according to directions on the bottle. Mosquitoes can breed even in the tiniest amounts of water. It is said that mosquito can breed in a teaspoonful of water under the right conditions. Once the adult can lay its eggs, it can breed into a mosquito. It can breed there. Remove stagnant water around the house so mosquitoes cannot breed. Remember, you are first in line to be bitten by mosquitoes that breed in your home, your own yard and garden. So make sure you be careful and rid your property of breeding grounds. Change water in PET drinking bowls and flower vases at least once a week. And ensure that you rub or scrub these containers to remove any eggs that may be stuck to the side. Regularly clean roof gutters, and now is the opportune time to do that, and drain so water runs freely. Check water tanks and other containers. Ensure they are securely covered and tight-fitting material so that mosquitoes cannot access them. It is also said that, I said about the teaspoon, but mosquitoes can also breed in the containers where your toothbrush holders, your dish drainers, any container that is capable of holding water will breed mosquitoes. Fogging is a last resort, and it only targets the adult mosquito. So we as a community need to play our role.
All right, thank you very much there. That's the Deputy Chief Environmental Health Officer, Ms. Cheryl St. Romain. Dr. Francois, we spoke about the numbers that have shown up presenting with dengue fever. Give us what the official count is at this time.
The official count as of last week was 168 confirmed cases.
And you're saying that what we're now seeing is that our young ones, children, are the ones most affected or most presenting, the age group of 5 to 14
5
years.
to 14, that's correct.
Okay, so what can parents do? We know we speak about on the household front, but on the personal front, what can parents do to protect the children?
Well, in terms of protection, it all begins with eliminating these breeding grounds, because if there are no breeding grounds, there are no mosquitoes and there would be no dengue fever. However, for parents and protection of children, it is recommended the use of insect repellents. These can be used directly on the skin. They can also be used on the clothing. The use of mosquito nets as well is also recommended for persons, particularly if an individual is already infected, to prevent the mosquito from biting that individual. And these same measures, not only for persons who are not infected, but for persons who are infected too, because the aim really is to ensure that the mosquito does not bite an infected person and therefore transmit. Persons who have screens, avoid leaving the door open at peak biting periods. So if you have screens on your windows and your doors, ensure that these are in place, you do not have holes in them, and ensure that the doors are closed. But primary focus should be on eliminating breeding grounds, because once that is done, then we reduce the mosquito indices and the likelihood of the mosquito and therefore the likelihood of transmission.
And you speak about the screens, just one moment. The repellents, is there a specific requirement to know that your repellent is very effective? What are we looking for? Is there a grade 2 repellent that you need to look for on the label in order for you to know that this is going to give me the protection that's needed?
Well, what is recommended is the DEET repellents. It comes in many different brands on the shelves in supermarkets that can be used for individuals. Paying attention to individuals who may have allergies, of course, that we have to consider. But once it has DEET, it is proven to be effective in repelling mosquitoes.
And clothing-wise, and we know it's very hot,
clothing,
but
yes.
I've always heard that to protect yourself from the mosquitoes, you need to wear those long sleeves, and
That's right.
So what do you recommend considering the sort of heat that we experience at this time?
Well, it's always recommended the use of light clothing. So if you do wear long sleeve or long pants, but make it something light cotton. It should not be anything heavy, and it should not be dark colored, because mosquitoes tend to be attracted to the dark places. So it should be something light, a white clothing, very light, because it is very, very hot. And of course, we do not want persons in their jackets and in their long sleeves and that sort of thing. But something nice and light and simple, light colored, to avoid attracting mosquitoes.
All right, Cheryl, you were chiming in.
And just to add to what Dr. Francois said, the peak biting hours are dusk and dawn. So early mornings are between 5 to 8, and in the evening from about 5 to 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. So during those times, it's not as hot as, so the warm clothing, the long clothing can suffice then. I also wanted to mention that the Aedes aegypti mosquito is a domesticated mosquito, so it lives in and around your homes. You find them inside of your homes. So you find them under your beds, in your cupboards, your closets, and so on. These are the areas that they are. So when you are doing your checks, you need to look for them in these areas.
And they've learned how to hide very well.
They do. Yes. So they domesticated, they live with us. And they're not as troublesome as the culex. The culex would be always the cuisine in your ears. You hear that sound, that nagging sound. Right. Yes. But the Aedes aegypti is a more quiet mosquito. So it would be right here. And the only time you'd feel its presence is when it bites you.
Okay. Now we use the term outbreak. And that, I think, can conjure anxiety in the population, among the population. Can you define for us what it means to now have to declare dengue an outbreak at this time?
Okay, so dengue is endemic to St. Lucia, which means it is something that we record throughout the year. So we have cases throughout the year, and these are things that we monitor at the Ministry of Health. However, there are certain points during the year when we expect increases, which is usually, as I said, during the wet season, when persons have the rains come in and persons have indiscriminate dumping of their garbage and they do not check their drains and that sort of thing. So we normally expect a small spike during the hurricane season. However, when you reach outbreak mode is when you have that expected spike, when it surpasses that spike, or when we have numbers that are outside. So during the calm period, January, February, March, when we tend not to see that the high numbers of dengue fever, and we happen to see during that period. So really and truly, an outbreak is just an increase in what is the numbers outside of what is expected.
But it tells you that something drastic is on its way.
That is correct. And which is why we have, through the weeks, we have been on air cautioning individuals, giving them guidance as to what needs to be done to eliminate breeding sites, to deal as best as we could, avoid indiscriminate dumping of garbage, look around your yard, do the daily inspections to avoid breeding grounds, because we did notice the increase in numbers. And like I said, we do expect it during this period. However, the numbers during this period are above what we expected. And therefore, this constitutes an outbreak, and it warrants more targeted and a more intense response to dealing with it.
We talk about the cost of this emerging threat. Help us understand, what exactly does that mean? Because someone would say, well, I got dengue, I had to go to the doctor, went to the hospital, got treated. What is this cost, this national cost that you speak of?
Well, we currently dealing with COVID. That in itself is a cost. But when you factor in dengue now, as Ms. St. Romain said, there are different aspects to the response. You have larviciding and you have the fogging, which deals with the adult mosquito. So now you have to place extra resources into purchasing, into the manpower, into the purchasing of the insecticides, etc., to be able to address it. So you have persons now who are already engaged in other activities dealing with COVID. I mean, Ms. St. Romain, a prime example, myself, who are already engaged in activities. So these persons now are redirected to both the COVID and the dengue. You have the financial resources in now doubling up your efforts to ensure that areas are protected, to doing more inspections, to fogging more, to larviciding more. And so there is that factor. And also, remember I said about 48% of persons have been hospitalized. So there is also that cost where persons now have to be in hospital admitted, and that is an expense on the family, not to mention if you're a daily paid worker, etc., that you are now missing work and missing some sort of income that could be brought to your family. So there are different costs associated with an outbreak, and it is something that we have to manage very carefully and address swiftly.
Cheryl, for your department, now that we are at the outbreak stage, you would have to be ramping up, no doubt. Explain to us what that process is.
Okay, just to continue from what Doctor, because there is a cost factor, officers will now have to be going out to do the larvicidal work. Because in an outbreak, what we want to do at this time is to knock down the adult mosquito. But these mosquitoes would have laid their eggs already in all water containers. So you'd have the officers now would have to go out to do the larvicidal work around the homes, in drains, open drains, anywhere water is pooled, we have to ensure that this pooled water is treated. We have another cost, which was mentioned, of officers having to do the fogging, and that's an overtime because they have to be working. Because I mentioned that the mosquito comes out during the early morning or on evenings, and evenings would be the ideal time to do that. So they would be have to go there between the hours of 5 to 8, and that's another cost for overtime. So it's really because we have now to be dealing with two issues. We have the very same officers who have to be going out there to do the assessments of the business places and so on. They are the ones who in the evening would have to be going out again to do the fogging and ensuring, or in the during the day to do the the larvicidal work, which is why we constantly encourage homeowners to do the inspections on their own, okay? The mosquito, it takes about 3 to 7 days, and like I mentioned earlier, on hot days, it would develop quicker, to develop quicker. So what we ask that persons every other day or every 3 days, walk around your home, both inside and outside, and ensure you empty and wash out any potential breeding ground. So what we want to do at this time is to eliminate every possible container that may store water in and around the home. It has to take a community effort.
And some people say that they have their fresh plants in the house, and often I remember growing up, sometimes you'll hear people say, well, there's dirt there in the plant, so no mosquito can come and breed in that. Is that the case?
Those are the plants, you water those plants, and then there's this container to the bottom that catches the water. The mosquito will breed in there. Will breed in there as well. So whilst you have, you tell yourself that you have the container with the soil, but you have another issue where the water that is being collected in the how do you call it, the plate at the bottom, has a potential rather, to breed the mosquito. Even your dish drainer. Yes, your dish drainers. So we encourage persons every day or every other day when you doing your dishes that you wash these things out completely. Wash it and scrub it, because the mosquito would lay its eggs, and these eggs would be stuck around. Another
is it visible to the eye, the naked eye?
It's very black, so you have to look very carefully, and they can be very small, so you have to look very carefully. So you may see some
dark spots there.
Yeah, the dark spots, and think that maybe it's dirt or something else, Yeah. Another example is your toilet bowl. That mosquito, most times we encourage persons to cover your toilet bowls at all times. Once you use it, you flush, you cover. Because that mosquito will lay its eggs, right? When you flush, the eggs go down into the septic tank, and it goes through its aquatic stages from the larva, the pupa, and when it has evolved into the adult mosquito, it comes out through the vent pipe. That vent pipe for your toilet, it comes out through that, and so we encourage persons as well to protect that vent pipe with a wire meshing, 1/16 of an inch we recommend, and to prevent the mosquito from flying out. So they're domesticated, they've become smart because they're endemic to St. Lucia, so they know exactly what to do to survive.
Okay, so that toilet example there is scary.
And even if you're septic tanks, we encourage persons to seal, because over time, there can be cracks and so on, wear and tear. So we encourage persons to just do a general assessment around your home, because that it can have cracks, and those cracks, the mosquito can go in there, lay its eggs, and the same development, and fly out as well, or fly out through the cracks.
So in washing with a dish drainer or any of those receptacles where you may find the water, the potential breeding ground, just soap and water would do?
Yes, just soap and water.
Or do you need to add any bleach in there?
Not necessarily, but soap and water can do. All you want to do is to ensure that because once you wash it out, the eggs, you wash it,
That would be safe.
But what we want to stress is to eliminate. So you need to ensure that there's free flowing of water at all times, and the roof gutter is a perfect example. Yes.
That gutter in there. If I were to have a container outside, we have our drums, we're collecting water. Would I put in some bleach in there? Would that prevent the mosquitoes from breeding?
What we ask that persons do, not necessarily bleach, but you can add some cooking oil, because what it does, it creates a film, because the adult mosquito, the pupa, for example, has to come up to the top for air. So when the film is created, it breaks down that cannot penetrate that film.
So oil.
You can add cooking oil as well.
Cooking oil.
Yeah.
Okay, and that again is great to know and inexpensive. We all have some. So is there the measurement or proportion that we need to put for the amount of water?
I've never thought about a measurement, but maybe about a cupful, a teaspoon.
So that you can see that, of course, it rises and then it can cover that surface area there. Okay.
But back to these water containers, I think the situation was exacerbated a bit when we had the drought. Remember we had,
Yes. And
So
we
a
only
number of
recently lifted the emergency.
So a number of persons, and what can happen? That mosquito, that smart mosquito, can lay its egg and survive a drought for sometimes almost a year, 6 months to a year. It will remain there, and the day it gets that drop of water, it will start the development into the different stages. Okay, so we need to be very careful. So during that drought, as I was saying, persons collected quite a bit of water. So you had a lot of standing water around the place. So that, encouraged, compounded with our rainy season, encouraged the proliferation.
And so now we have to go and dispose of the waters that we have. So we have to use it up, and clean up the containers.
And cover
The issue
them.
is not, that's right. It's not just collecting water. There's nothing wrong with collecting water because some persons need to collect water. But collecting water and ensuring that it is covered properly and you do not have breeding. That is practically the only way we can control this. Ensure that there are no breeding grounds for the mosquito.
So do we use mesh fabric to do the covering, or you want something more solid to cover the drums with? I know you used to use those sacks before, so is that still advisable?
Yeah, we encourage the mesh sturdy enough because we do not want it to sag in any way. Because the moment it starts sagging, it will pull. And once it pulls, the mosquito will lay its eggs, and the same process will continue. So you need to ensure whatever you use to cover is sturdy enough and does not create that sagginess to pull water for the breeding. And at all times, whether it be a bucket in your house, whether it be a drum outside, or any container, once you use, you cover immediately. Because once you leave it open, it will find its way. Like I said, it's domesticated. So it's in there and it's watching. It needs the water to breed, to lay its eggs, and for
so it's watching to see what you're doing and waiting for the slip up. What are the conversations like with these agencies like the Castries City Council and those other town and village councils in helping clear up areas? Because while we're asking for homeowners, but there is an onus on the state to ensure that areas and communities remain as clean as possible.
In the past, we've been working hand in hand with all the councils, how do you call it, the constituency councils. And we are continuing to do that right now. So we have engaged them, the constituency councils, to play their part. Infrastructure. So we are engaging all the other agencies to play their role. Solid waste management, infrastructure for the clearing of the drains, and so on. So we work together to ensure that we try to eliminate as many potential breeding areas as possible.
Nice.
And what we have always done through the years, it has always been a multi-sectoral approach. This in no way is a Ministry of Health approach. This in no way is WASCO's responsibility. But more than anything, we want for communities and individuals to take ownership, for them to feel empowered that they can do something, because we can put everything in place. We can assist and we can do all what we can, but it really and truly boils down to also what happens in the household. There is a level of responsibility that we need for persons and communities to accept and to step up to if we are to make a dent in the numbers that we are seeing.
So I know the last program that I watched, the conversation centered on, even if I were to have taken all of these precautions and then I have a neighbor maybe 10 houses down, and they have all the right conditions in order to allow the mosquitoes to breed, then I am in problems. So how do I protect myself? Perhaps maybe do not want to engage my neighbor. It means sometimes you create a little acrimony there. You don't necessarily, because people get defensive. What do? Do I call environmental health? And how do I begin to engage you, and what help would you be able to give me?
That responsibility that Dr. Francois spoke about, everyone has a responsibility. So if you see, you you call. So if you notice an area or your neighbor where likely has an area where it potentially can be a breeding area for mosquitoes, you call the Department of Environmental Health, and we, our officers, would then go out to that area and have a conversation with that person and do the necessary treatment of those areas.
Okay. Let's talk about the symptoms of the dengue fever. And because you were saying that in your preamble that there may be some mirroring of the COVID-19 symptoms. Mm-hmm. So give us a little bit more information on that.
So let me go backtrack a little. So what we normally do at the department, we monitor, and dengue, we have syndromes, which is signs and symptoms. So we monitor what is called undifferentiated fever, which is when an individual presents with fever and sort of non-specific signs and symptoms. So the main complaint is fever, but they may have the joint pain or a little muscle pain, and it's pretty much very difficult to distinguish what exactly is happening. So that is one area that alerted us to that something is happening, and it normally alerts us to vector-borne diseases like leptospirosis as well as dengue. So in terms of signs and symptoms, the individual normally presents with that what we call the undifferentiated fever, fever being the main complaint. However, there may be joint pains and muscle pains, and we know influenza. Persons start that way. They may not have the cough till later on, or the runny nose, or whatever have you. So the undifferentiated fever, when an individual presents with that, there are so many illnesses that you have to take into consideration. While we are going through this dengue outbreak right now, and we have COVID-19, we have to pay very close attention, ask the right questions. What is characteristic of dengue, however, is that headache and that pain behind the eyes. A lot of persons, the majority of persons who are presenting with signs and symptoms, because remember I said that some persons are asymptomatic. Most of them present with that pain behind the eye. So that is very characteristic of dengue. However, you do have in advanced stages, you can progress with warning signs, which is when you start brushing your teeth, you have that fever and the joint pains and the pain behind your eyes, and then you start brushing teeth and you may notice a little bleeding to the gums and that sort of thing. It gives you an indication that your condition is worsening. Okay, so at that point, it would become necessary to seek some sort of medical attention. Most of the cases do resolve on its own. However, it can complicate. And as I said, if you have had a particular serotype in the past, you are at greater risk of presenting with a more complicated or more severe form of dengue. So the first one may be asymptomatic. It may be very mild with just the mild fever, the muscle pains, the joint pains, the pain behind the eyes. However, we have 2 and 3 circulation. Say last year you had 1. Now you get type 2. So you are more at risk of developing into that more severe type with the bleeding. The bleeding may become more, and at that point you would be hospitalized and the necessary care and treatment given to you.
So is the bleeding limited to serotype 4?
No, it's not.
Okay.
No, it's not. It's just a complication, and as you get the different serotypes, as you become infected with the different serotypes, you tend to progress more to that. So there's no specific serotype that will cause the bleeding. It's just that after you become infected with a second or a third or even the 4th type, then the likelihood of you progressing to a more severe form increases.
We're very fond of our traditional medicines here in St. Lucia. I know that once you begin to feel like you get in the cough and the cold, you go get.
That's right.
You go to your garden there to get the bush.
And we have seen it with so many of the illnesses. We've seen it with chikungunya, with Zika. We've seen it with.
So how, and you did indicate that if you have mild dengue, it will resolve on its own.
It usually resolves.
Usually resolves on its own. At what point? How many days? Let's look at a time period that I should say, well, I'm not getting any better. I shouldn't wait any longer and contact the nearest medical facility.
So at it usually resolves in about the 5 days, and the fever starts decreasing in intensity as well as the frequency. So you take painkillers or antipyretics which control the fever, and these would give you a break. You get to a point where nothing you take is resolving this fever, especially in children who may complicate and may have febrile seizures. So you monitor them closely. At that point, it would become necessary to go to a doctor to seek some medical advice. Also, if you start noticing that you just lethargic, persons seem dehydrated, they're not eating and they're not drinking and nothing's staying down, it would be wise to also seek medical attention. Likewise, if you start getting severe abdominal pain or you start with the bleeding, it would be advisable also to seek medical attention and not wait for it to just resolve on its own.
Okay, so with the children, once you detect that fever, should you take no chances and simply go to a medical doctor?
We would not recommend it on the very first day. On the very first day, it could be it could be so many, it could be so many things. We would advise that you monitor your child, but you know your child. If your child is complaining of that fever with severe headache, with severe joint pains, by all means, on day one, you seek medical attention. A mild fever, which can be controlled at home, the child has no underlying illnesses, it can be monitored at home. But if there is any concern, any thing that points to this is not the normal behavior of my child, it could be day 1, it could be day 2, it could be whatever day it is, we would advise you to go in. And this does not pertain just to children, but to the public as well, because we do not want persons to sit at home just waiting for it to pass. Yes.
Because as you progress, or the disease progresses, you can die.
Yes. So we have not had any deaths, and we're grateful for that. But it can progress to that, and it can lead to death. So by all means, don't wait for, we're not looking at days of sickness, but we're looking at how you feel. We're looking at how your body is responding. Some persons might have, like I said, especially in children, they may start vomiting. Some of them, they may complain of severe abdominal pain. If it's day 1, we would not advise anybody to remain home under such conditions.
And I wanted to say something. Well, we have 2 serotypes, as Dr. Francois indicated, but in most cases, one person can get 1, 2, or 3, yeah? And in some instances, you may say, I've had dengue already, so you let down your guard.
I'm immune.
Yes, you're immune. So you need to continue, be as vigilant as you will. Continue ensuring that you do your assessments around your homes and taking the necessary precautions. That's important because you can have all 4 strains.
Yeah.
Okay.
And remember that immunity is for that particular serotype, not for the other 3.
Not for the other 3.
Not for the other, just for that particular one, which is why you can get dengue. There are 4 serotypes, and you can get dengue up to 4 times. Each time, the likelihood of you progressing to a more severe form or even death increases.
So, if I were to have serotype 1, am I now more susceptible to contracting dengue?
You're not more susceptible to contracting dengue. What you are more susceptible to is the more severe form.
Severe type.
So you've had type 1, you get lifelong immunity, you no longer get type 1. So if that's in circulation, you're good. However, if we have, like we currently have type 2 and type 3 in circulation, then you are at risk for type 2 and type 3. Now, type 2, you get short-term immunity when you get one type. So you get short-term immunity to the other 3, and that immunity only lasts about 2 to 3 months. So if we started at the beginning of the hurricane season, we have 2 to 3 circulating, and you get it at the very beginning of the outbreak, there is a likelihood that you can get, your immunity can wane, and you can get a second, probably type 3, later on during that same season. And then you would be more at risk of a more severe form, more complications of dengue fever.
We need to maintain our vigilance, maintain and ensure that we eliminate the breeding grounds.
Now we have our proposed reopening for schools for the academic year, September 7. Environmental health. How much work have you done around the school compounds? Is it a situation where you would be paying attention to the school compounds on a periodic basis? Schools
are closed now, and we have the maintenance of officers there, but we are working in close collaboration with the Ministry of Education. What we normally do, however, is when we are conducting our larvicidal entomological surveillance, we do go to the schools and ensure that the drains, the guttering, and especially the water containers, the water tanks, are maintained and does not pose a threat to the school and the occupants.
Okay, so we wouldn't see that on a bi-monthly basis that your department will go in and do fogging or anything of that sort?
Yeah, fogging, like I indicated, fogging is normally seen as a last resort because it only targets the adult mosquito. But we have to be doing, the vigilance must be geared towards the entomological surveillance, the larvicidal, ensuring that we read the area of breeding containers. And if we can't, large containers, we ensure that we treat them with the appropriate larvicide.
Okay. We talk about the north of the island, I believe the east as well, where where the numbers are most concentrated. So is that any sort of reason for our brothers and sisters off in the west and down in the south to breathe and say, okay, it's not my problem?
No. Even before, I needed to say that every community in St. Lucia needs to be concerned right now. These mosquitoes, they have a flight range of about 100 yards, okay? Additionally, they can be considered as hitchhikers. So they can maybe enter your bag or something and then hitch a ride on a bus, your vehicle. And when you disembark, they disembark as well. So if you're traveling from Castries to Vieux-Fort, so the Castries mosquito can hitch a ride and get down to Vieux-Fort. And that mosquito may possibly be infected. Okay, so at this point, with the declaration of the outbreak, every single individual in St. Lucia needs to be concerned.
And let me just add, while we have seen it in the north and we've seen it in the Castries Basin, we've seen it to the east, there are cases in the different regions. So it's not that we do not have cases there. The cases are there, but to a lesser extent. And as Ms. St. Romain explained, all the more reason for these areas to start putting measures in place to ensure that the numbers do not pick up, that breeding does not continue. Because if you have it controlled from the get-go, then you stand a better chance, as opposed to when you have massive breeding, you have double the work in ensuring that your containers and all your breeding grounds are eliminated. So what they should be doing is really taking note. Listen, we need to be on ground right now. Our situation is not dire. It is not as bad compared to other areas, but we need to put measures in place and not wait for us to reach the counts of the other areas. So it is in other areas, just to a lesser extent.
How would I know that I have dengue? Are we doing testing on island?
We are testing for dengue on island. As a matter of fact, we are liaising with the Pan American Health Organization because we did receive support for COVID, our COVID response, and we are doing PCR testing. So we're trying to go in that direction as well, building up our capacity. So there are different tests for COVID-19. There is the antibody test, there is the antigen test, there is the PCR test. So we actually, at this point, trying to expand and do a lot more. We also, as always, we rely on the Caribbean Public Health Agency. So in the event that we become overwhelmed, we do have our reference lab in Trinidad that we send samples to. And right now, because we're not doing the serotyping, we can confirm dengue in St. Lucia. However, we do not do the serotyping in St. Lucia, and we are trying to build capacity to do that. So currently what happens is that the sample, it is positive, it goes down to the Caribbean Public Health Agency, and we would get the serotyping, which is how we know that we have type 2 and type 3 in circulation. But we are in the process. I'm very happy to say that hopefully it comes on soon, we would be able to do the serotyping. But we have always been testing for dengue in St. Lucia, and it is something that we continue to do.
Now, does that affect the treatment of the individual if you do not have that serotyping?
No, it does not. It does not. There is no specific treatment for dengue. You are treated based on how you present, based on your signs and symptoms. So if you're bleeding and they run the blood work, it depends on what they find, then they manage you conservatively. And if you require whatever it is you require, it is based on that. So there is no set, okay, this is the medication and you will be okay. It really depends on how the individual presents.
And when you talk about the bleeding, we mentioned that if you're brushing the teeth and you see, you do have gingivitis that can cause that. That's as right. well, the gum diseases. But apart from the bleeding from the gums, what other areas of the body that you may come across the blood and you may have
Or you can bleed from any mucosal membrane. You can bleed from the nose as well. And in the extreme forms, you can have internal bleeding as well. So at this point, we're hoping that persons don't wait to get to this point, which is why I said if you notice the bleeding of the nose, you notice the bleeding of the gums and the fever that is prolonged, by all means, you have the severe abdominal pain, you're vomiting, by all means seek medical attention so that you do not get to that point and you're managed in a healthcare facility where you can be prevented from getting to that stage.
Okay, very well. All right, so now that we are on the outbreak declaration, coming out of your department, what it is that you are, does it require you to do any additional work at this time?
What we cannot do is let our guards down. We have noted the numbers. We are working extra hard to ensure that the data keeps coming into us, because the data is collected from around the island, and to ensure that that data is accurate, it reaches us in a timely fashion, because that data is then fed to the Department of Environmental Health, where they know of the cases. So in cases, as Ms. St. Romain pointed out, there would be the need for fogging, because you need to get rid of the adult to prevent it biting an infected individual and transmitting. So there is a need for timely data collection and collaboration with their department so that the necessary is done, so that we break that chain of transmission.
With COVID, we're seeing that we are doing comparison with other countries and islands. Is it important for us to be looking at what's happening with dengue fever outside of St. Lucia for us to get an understanding of perhaps where we'll be heading?
It is very important. From the beginning of the season, earlier this year, our regional counterparts had advised or had forewarned that we should expect increases in the numbers of dengue. We have seen in particularly the French islands, that the numbers, they have declared outbreaks and the numbers are high. And we have noted that in circulation are types 1, 2, and 3. So it is extremely important. We've isolated 2 and 3. We have not found type 1 yet, but I'm not saying that it will not be there. We do have travel back and forth to our neighboring territories. So it is possible that later on during the outbreak, we do discover a type 1. So we do have to pay a very close attention to what is happening with our neighbors, so that we can plan ahead and try as much as possible to keep things under control.
And so as you indicated that we already do have this, our traveling, and of course we have the bubble and dengue present there in those bubble countries. So once you come in and we do the checks, the temperature checks, someone detected if that temperature, and then they whisk away, they will be taken to a quarantine facility?
Febrile persons would be taken, if you're febrile, you would be taken to an isolation facility and the necessary tests run. So we would eliminate, of course, first and foremost, we would eliminate COVID. And then, of course, it's negative for COVID. Then we start prying and looking for other illnesses which may mimic COVID or result in that undifferentiated fever, as we call it. So there are other respiratory viruses. There is dengue, there is leptospirosis that we still check for. So we still do our screening for Zika. So it's not just dengue, we still do Zika, we still do chikungunya. So we would test for a variety of illnesses before that individual would be discharged.
Have we had any such cases where we've had to return a national or traveler sent to isolation and then perhaps presented with dengue?
No, we have not. No, we have not.
Now, you mentioned chikungunya and Zika. You preempted me there because I wanted to know, we hear nothing about our dear friends, chikungunya and Zika, since they made their arrival so years ago. What has happened? It's now considered to be that we have immunity, herd immunity with these conditions?
We saw massive numbers of both when we did have the outbreaks. As I pointed out, we keep testing because what we did expect was that, like dengue, it would become endemic. The Aedes aegypti is around, so we do expect to see it. We have had a few cases, and like I said, at the unit, it is something that we monitor. So any numbers out of the ordinary, we would declare an outbreak. So we get a few cases of chikungunya, 1 or 2 cases, nothing major. Zika, we have not had cases of, but we continue testing because we know that it is possible. Usually every 5 years or so, we get outbreaks of the different arboviral diseases. So we continue monitoring, but we have not had any significant number of cases of either one of them.
All right, let's get final words coming from Cheryl.
Okay, like I've been saying from the time I started, that every one of us have a responsibility, and the only way we can eradicate or eliminate the mosquito or dengue fever at this point in time is to work together. Householders, ensure that you do your checks. You, as best as you can, try to get rid of any potential container that has a likelihood to collect water and the potential for breeding. So you have to help the Department of Environmental Health so we can help the country.
All right, Dr. Francois.
Thank you. My final words would be a call on St. Lucians to be vigilant. We have declared an outbreak of dengue fever. We do have COVID-19 in circulation. I mean, with our borders open, there is the likelihood of new cases presenting. But we do ask St. Lucians to be vigilant. The initial signs and symptoms may mimic each other. We ask persons to monitor themselves. Our healthcare facilities are open and available to all. We do testing for both COVID-19 as well as dengue fever. And so persons, please, you have that fever, you start getting that pain behind the eyes, or you're unsure of what is happening, please feel free to visit your wellness center and seek medical advice. But to echo Cheryl's last words, for us to deal with this dengue situation, it really is a matter of personal responsibility. It really is a matter of eliminating breeding sites. So we ask persons to just exercise your responsibility as a citizen. Be responsible, own up, and do the necessary in order to assist the ministry in dealing with this current outbreak of dengue fever.
Yes, so in effect, help us help you.
That's right.
Well said.
And I think most importantly, not to panic. So as the Ministry of Health has declared an outbreak of dengue fever, not to panic, as you've just heard from the National Epidemiologist Dr. Francois and the Deputy Chief Environmental Health Officer Cheryl Romain. The most important thing is action. You need to act, ensure that your surroundings completely free of anything that will create the conditions for the breeding of the Aedes aegypti mosquito, and make sure that you pay attention to yourself, look for the signs and symptoms of dengue, and as you heard Dr. Francois said, it may mimic COVID-19, and if for any reason you feel uncertain as to what exactly is happening to you, please visit a medical doctor. You can go to the health center, you can go to a private doctor, but don't stay and, perhaps allow yourself to progress and get into a worse state. Thank you so much for joining us on this very important midday update. I am Melissa Joseph, hoping to see you next time.